kind of follow. I like people to have a roadmap because we're trying to get from point A to point B, and I need you to come with me. This morning, pardon me, was the definitional perspective. I want to move forward and talk about the scope of covenant because I need you to be biblically convinced that when we talk about the scope of what's involved in the consideration of covenant, that you're clear in your mind that it's inclusive of both the church and the family. I don't want you to accept that merely because I say it. I want you to know that it is the realistic scope of the covenant. As a matter of fact, the language that identifies its scope is really embodied in the context. And what I'm going to do is go to a New Testament text in Hebrews chapter 8, and I would remind you in advance that Hebrews 8:8 following is a quotation taken from the weeping prophet Jeremiah in Jeremiah 31:31. So I want to read from Hebrews chapter 8, verses 8 to 12. I really would not like to have to get into a theological refutation and debate about who is indeed the writer and author of the book of Hebrews, except to say to you that you really, really can go to heaven not knowing who wrote the book of Hebrews. In Hebrews 8:8 to 12, for finding fault with them, he saith, Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. Not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt, because they continued not in my covenant, and I regarded them not, saith the Lord. For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith the Lord. I will put my laws into their mind and write them in their hearts, and I will be to them a God, and they shall be to me a people. Notice the language. I will put my law in their mind, write them in their hearts. Notice this, I will be to them a God, and they shall be to me a people. Those are two important components in the covenant. God is the Father, and I need you to also notice that God is the initiator of the covenant. And that's going to become significant when we come into the New Testament. In a moment, I'm going to talk to you about the difference between diatheke and sundiatheke and how it is used in the New Testament. And it's important to understand that there's a difference between a contract, an agreement, a compact that's made between two individuals, sundiatheke, two inferiors. And when there is a diatheke, a covenant made between inferiors and a superior. Because in that instance, the superior, 99.9% of the time, is the initiator of the contract or the covenant. You don't have a covenant with God because you set the terms and conditions. God sets the terms and conditions. So the language of covenant is embodied here in Hebrews chapter 8 and verse 8. Let me do just a couple of reflections. It's interesting how when you study language, whether it is the Chaldean Hebrew and the classical Koine Greek, and I'm not trying to appear like I know much, believe me when I tell you I don't know much. But I need you to remember that the Old Testament was originally given in Chaldean Hebrew and the New Testament in classical Koine Greek, and both of them constitute the profound wisdom of God. Number one, it's a dead language, both of them, Hebrew and the classical Koine Greek, and by dead language I mean the meaning of the words never change, unlike the English language. You know, 30 years ago, Shabazz, I don't know if I should use these kind of illustrations. I gotta remember I'm not in New York. But I think Brother Dutton's going to protect me here. 30 years ago, you could wake up and say, I'm feeling quite gay this morning. Whew, that was dangerous. I wouldn't advise that today. I wouldn't advise that. It carried a different meaning, really. 30 years ago, it meant that you were happy, no more than that. And I'm not trying to be condescending, and I'm not trying to poke fun. You know, if you have a challenge, I'm not doing that. I'm not going there with that. But what I am is the best illustration I can think of at the moment. Our English language, 30 years ago, you couldn't find the word can't in the dictionary. It's in the dictionary now because our language evolves, it changes. Not so.
You could find it in Alabama.
Oh. Don't you love this guy? Boy, and if you shall know the truth. So a couple of reflections. Number one, we learned that the Hebrew word brit is a binding or solemn agreement. It's equivalent to cutting the covenant or cutting between two or more parties. Therefore, it is a covenant. And this is lent to our working definition. And that is, it's a binding or solemn agreement between two or more parties. I wanted to show you that the concept of cutting the covenant is indeed biblical. By the way, the notion of passing through when a covenant is made is that the seriousness associated with that kind of agreement. It's not something frivolous, but it's very, very serious when you cut the covenant. If we should break the terms to which we have agreed, just like these animals were cut in half, may we be cut in half. It sounds pretty serious to me. Sounds pretty serious. So we showed you the example from Jeremiah chapter 34. And I want to move on today, and I want to talk about the church as a family covenant. Brother Dutton, this principle, my head has been buried in this principle for about 8 years now. And every time I study the Bible, I keep looking at the Bible through the eyeglasses of the law of divine economy. And I'm blown away by this because I see it everywhere. It's so true. Our God never does something for nothing.